Incredible moment. A desperate wolf reveals 3 frozen tiger cubs in need of a surprising rescue. The biting chill of winter settled over the ranch as Sarah glanced out the frost-kissed window, the world beyond shimmering in a harsh white. A year had passed since the accident that stole her husband, and even the snow felt like a silent reminder of all she had lost. As a single mother to 10-year-old Lily and 8-year-old Ben, mornings flowed into endless tasks: feeding cattle, mending broken fences, and enduring crushing bills. A monstrous blizzard had swept through the valley overnight. She rose, stomach tightening, as uncertainty clawed at her sanity. Another day of relentless chores was ahead, and the burdens of loss, debt, and responsibility intertwined around her chest. What was she doing? Did she have anything left to give? Fixing breakfast, she felt resentment grow. Why had everything changed? With each crack of the skillet, her mind raced, filled with visions of a thawed future that seemed impossibly out of reach. The irony bit into her. She had always been the rock for others, but now, as the community's backbone, she found herself unraveling. Outside, the huff of gusts stirred unease, but just as danger threatened her resolve, a desperate howl echoed. Her heart raced anew, but not with fear. Curiosity surged. It drew her boots to the door. Trudging through the knee-deep snow, a yearning tugged at her, nearly feral. The desperate cries led her to the ravine, heart thudding as 3 small forms emerged from the gloom. A shiver shot through her as she dug her hands into the frosty ground, and there they were, the frozen tiger cubs, their fragile bodies shivering and eyes pleading. It awakened something raw within her, a protective instinct as palpable as her love for her own children. Time melted away, but realities gripped her tight. She raced back home, trembling fingers dialing the wildlife experts. The phone call rang ominously in her ears, and when the representative dismissed her concerns, stating it was too dangerous to attempt a rescue, a frustration ignited. "You don't know my strength," she wanted to scream. A glimpse of hope twisted into bitterness as she wrestled with fears of inadequacy. Could she truly save them? Did she have the right? The phone call ended, leaving a bitter taste. They didn't know her. They didn't believe in the resolve buried underneath her struggles. Yet as uncertainty lingered, her father emerged, a glimmer of wisdom shining through his tired eyes. "We've always respected nature, Sarah," he said. "This is about more than just you." Inspired, she envisioned rallying the community to stand with her. But could they see past their judgment? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With determination pounding like a drum inside her, Sarah went into town to gather support, but doubts circled like vultures. The elite animal rescue team's scornful dismissals echoed, their arrogance stealing the air from her lungs, making her doubt her worth. She was just a woman from nowhere, lost in a cruel world that prioritized qualifications over instincts. As community voices dwindled against the roar of dismay, anger surged, her pulse racing as the arrival of the rescue organization loomed near. Would they take the cubs, dismissing her plea? Desperation knotted in her stomach as she envisioned a confrontation standing among a frozen audience, her voice trembling, but resolute. This was no longer just about the cubs. It was an issue of self-worth, courage, and redefining her existence in a world that had swiftly shifted. The crowd's murmurs spiraled. Sarah gazed into the sea of faces lost in thought, doubt swimming in their eyes. But now her own fear felt insurmountable. On that frigid day, something was about to shatter. Would she break through their apathy and assert herself, or would the storm of doubt devour her whole? Tension coiled tight in the air as anticipation hung like a shadow, ready to explode at any moment, leaving her clinging to the fragile thread of hope that the journey had just begun. The morning sun rose weakly, a timid glow struggling to pierce the heavy clouds that lingered over the ranch. The chill in the air only amplified Sarah's already tumultuous thoughts as she sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at a half-eaten slice of toast. The previous day's events played on repeat in her mind, weaving threads of uncertainty into her heart. She could still hear the dismissive tones of the rescue team's spokesperson, their practiced indifference cutting through her like the icy wind outside. What if she failed? The weight of her responsibilities, her children, the ranch, and now the tiger cubs, wrapped around her like a vice. The thought tightened her chest, and for a moment she found herself teetering on the brink of despair. But then her father's words returned to her, sharp and clear. "We've always respected nature." This was bigger than just her, and somewhere deep inside, Sarah felt a flicker of determination igniting. Lily and Ben ambled into the kitchen, their bright eyes reflecting youthful innocence, blissfully unaware of the turmoil that engulfed their mother. Sarah forced a smile, loving them fiercely, knowing that they deserved more than the shadows of her grief. She could almost hear her husband's laughter in the corners of her mind, urging her to harness her spirit for the sake of their children. "Mom, are we going to try to help the cubs?" Ben asked, his voice piercing through the fog of her thoughts. She hesitated. "I'm working on it, sweetie," she finally replied, each word heavy with promise. Their faith in her made her feel stronger, propelled her toward action. The moment of truth pressed against her, an internal compass guiding her choices. Right then, a plan began crystallizing in her mind. She couldn't rally support without demonstrating her conviction first. A rush of adrenaline surged through her as she grabbed her coat, standing taller, defying the cold and her doubts. "Let's get some supplies," she said with unexpected conviction. The children brightened, innocently buoyed by their mother's spirit, and soon they were bundled up and shuffling out to the barn. As Sarah sifted through boxes of unused tools and equipment, she felt empowerment fluttering in her chest. If she could gather the essentials, prove that she was willing to do the work, perhaps the community would lend their support. She spotted the sturdy rope, a necessity for the rescue plan forming in her mind, and felt a surge of capability. "What's the plan, Mom?" Lily asked, curiosity shining through the layered jackets. "There might be a way to reach the cubs," she replied, and without fully understanding how, she realized she was investing more than just energy. She was infusing hope back into her spirit. The next hour transformed her from a frantic woman burdened by grief to someone anchored by purpose. Each step felt empowering, every movement a rebellion against the despair that had marred her life for too long. She cracked her knuckles, not out of anxiety, but as a declaration of her resolve. As they worked, Sarah communicated with the kids about the challenges they might face, translating her fears into lessons of bravery and persistence. This was a pivotal moment, not just for the cubs, but also for their growth as a family. Outside, the wind howled again, but within her, a different storm brewed, one of determination and grit. The world might view her as just a widow, a single mother struggling on a ranch. But what they didn't see yet was the fierce protector taking shape. When the supply box was finally filled, Sarah gathered the children close, determination solidifying in her mind. "We're going to save those cubs and show everyone what we're made of," she declared, and their cheers rang out, reverberating against the stark winter landscape. But even as she tasted the sweetness of resolution, a new fear prickled at her. What if the rescue didn't go as planned? What if she encountered obstacles worse than scornful looks? Yet the time had come to face the unknown, to embrace the impending confrontation with doubt and judgment. The journey would test her in ways she never anticipated, but she was ready to claw through shadows. And so, with the kids at her side, she took a deep breath, stepping into the biting cold as the shadows of uncertainty loomed large, waiting to pounce. What would this rescue reveal not just about the cubs, but about herself? Stepping outside, the sharp wind stung Sarah's cheeks like icy needles, but the chill accompanied her burgeoning determination, propelling her forward. The landscape that appeared barren and lifeless at first glance now held a newfound significance. Every bone in her body emphasized the importance of her mission, the weight of responsibility morphing into a fire within. The usual sounds of the ranch, the clucking of chickens, the distant mooing of cattle, seemed muffled by the gravity of her endeavor. Sarah led Lily and Ben toward the edge of the woods, where they spotted faint paw prints in the snowy ground. Their presence ignited an urgency in her. This was where they might find the lost cubs. "Look for signs," she instructed softly, as they fanned out slightly, eyes scanning every inch of earth for clues. The children's laughter was cut short, as they quickly came to understand the seriousness of the task. What would they do if they actually found the cubs? The thought spiraled through her mind like an unwelcome guest. Would she be able to control her fear? Would she have the strength required to handle such fragile lives? Though these worries gnawed at her, they were also part of her internal dialogue, an acknowledgement that these feelings were valid but shouldn't dictate her actions. She knelt to examine a particular cluster of paw prints leading deeper into the underbrush, her heart pounding in rhythm with the crunch of snow beneath her boots. Focus, she reminded herself. Clarity. "Mom! Over here!" Ben called out, his voice echoing with excitement laced with apprehension. A small clearing revealed an indentation in the snow, the unmistakable hollow where the cubs had burrowed. Sarah's breath quickened as adrenaline surged through her veins. "Stay back," she cautioned, glancing sharply at the children before stepping forward. She knew instinctively that passion had to be paired with caution. Wild animals, frightened and cornered, could be unpredictable. With each calculated movement, Sarah began to clear away the snow. The wind whipped around her, but she concentrated on the task at hand. As her hands worked automatically, her mind became a flurry of thoughts, cycling through concerns about her children's safety, the cubs' survival, and their own ability to execute the rescue. Then, all at once, she unearthed a glimpse of orange and black, mottled fur. 3 small bodies were huddled together, shivering against the cold. The sight struck her, a dual punch of awe and fear. These creatures were so small, so vulnerable. Could she really protect them? Instinctively, Sarah crouched lower, whispering encouragement to the cubs. They looked up at her with wide, frightened eyes, and in that moment, she felt a connection that transcended human and animal. She was a protector, destined to fight for their survival. "Ben, Lily, get ready to help," she urged, rallying her children back to her side. Fear was a real presence now, but it had a different quality. It was a reminder of the stakes. She needed their help, but had to be ready to shield them from harm. What struck her hardest was how this startling discovery prompted a rush of insight about her own identity. Each breath, each shiver of the cubs, fueled her resilience. She was not merely a widow, but a warrior not afraid to take drastic measures for what mattered to her. "Okay, here's the plan," she started, her voice steadying as she organized her thoughts. "We need to get them somewhere warm, somewhere safe. They're scared, so we must be gentle but swift." The children nodded, their expressions a mix of concern and burgeoning excitement. Sarah felt a surge of gratitude for their unwavering trust, energizing her resolve. As they carefully lifted the cubs, a new swell of anxiety gripped her. Would she be able to nurture them back to health? Deep down, she was wrestling with the reality of what lay ahead. As they began their retreat, each tiny heartbeat felt like a promise, and Sarah committed to that promise, a commitment forged in the fires of survival and maternal instinct. Unbeknownst to her, however, lurking behind the trees was an onlooker, someone who had their own intentions regarding the cubs. And as Sarah ventured further into the blurred lines of courage and self-doubt, she remained blissfully unaware of the challenges that were silently gathering on the horizon, challenges that would force her to face not just the danger outside, but the battle within. Could she maintain her resolve in the face of an unseen adversary? Familiar doubts crept in as she considered. What if her thinking didn't align with the reality of what lay ahead? As Sarah and her children carefully navigated back through the dense trees, the fragile bodies of the cubs secured in their arms, an undeniable tension coursed through the air. Every stride felt laden with dual significance. She was racing against the bitter cold that threatened the cubs, but also against her own inner turmoil. The enormity of the situation weighed heavily on her heart. Could she truly be the savior they needed? They returned to the ranch, the familiar sights of home now infused with an unsettling unfamiliarity. The sunlight, dimmed by swirling clouds, cast a gray hue over the landscape. As they reached the warmth of the barn, Sarah's focus shifted. It was no longer just about finding the cubs. She had to ensure their survival. "Ben, get some blankets," she instructed, her voice steady, despite the whirlwind of emotion swirling inside her. "Lily, help me find some food. Something warm, maybe milk." The children scrambled into action, proving they had absorbed more than playful lessons in their time together. Sarah marveled at their resilience, but doubt gnawed at her edges. Would her decisions, however heartfelt, be enough to protect these fragile lives? Each cub was a testament to vulnerability, and the questions in her mind multiplied as their small forms settled in the makeshift shelter she created out of hay and blankets. "Okay, little ones," she cooed softly as they nestled together, their orange fur contrasting sharply with the dull gray of the barn. "We're going to take care of you." The warmth of the barn gradually seeped into the tense atmosphere, but Sarah's thoughts spiraled as she organized what she believed would be a nurturing space. She unpacked the supplies from her experience in caring for farm animals, but wrestled with what she had learned. The cubs were wild, not livestock. They were not accustomed to human proximity. Fear rose up within her as she contemplated the challenge ahead. Minutes passed slowly as her children brought in blankets and small bowls. They cooed and laughed, unknowingly weighing her down further with their innocence. Each sound sharpened her sense of responsibility, intensifying the pressure. The juxtaposition of her joy for her children and the dire situation weighed heavily. Could she balance fostering hope while orchestrating their survival? "Sarah," Lily said, her voice wavering as she hesitated at the door. "What if their mother comes back?" That very question cut through Sarah's heart. The dangerous unpredictability of a wild animal returning to a human presence stirred alarm inside her. "We need to keep them safe first, okay?" she replied, forcing her voice to embody the calm she aimed to project. The challenge came not solely from the environment, but from confronting her maternal instinct against raw reality. Moments of uncertainty churned in her gut. Could she stand against an angry mother bear, if it meant preserving her children and the cubs? The juxtaposition of her instinct to protect reverberated through her mind. Every decision she made would echo for the rest of their lives. Taking a deep, steadying breath, Sarah gathered her resolve. She began to document her feelings, jotting down notes in a worn notebook she always kept by her side. This wasn't just about the cubs. It was about her own journey. Each word, each reflection, was not just a mission, but a testament to her evolution. From being an overwhelmed widow to a determined warrior facing insurmountable odds. As the evening deepened, the barn filled with flickering shadows from the dim light. Sarah glanced at the sleeping cubs, getting lost in their tiny forms. A pulse of hope began to flicker amidst her anxieties. If she could nurture these lives, maybe she could also rekindle her sense of purpose. With the horizon darkening, an unwelcome noise suddenly echoed from the woods outside, a low growl penetrating the stillness. The sound sent a fresh wave of fear through Sarah's gut, and her heart raced. "What was that?" Ben whispered, his wide eyes searching her face for reassurance. The sense of peace that had enveloped them came crashing down. The moment had arrived not just for the cubs but for her. The unseen adversary had revealed itself, and now she would have to confront not only the danger but the ultimate test of her newfound strength. Would she be able to shield her children and the cubs from the threat looming at their doorstep? The reality of the situation crushed down. She had come too far to turn back now. The time had come to face the very fears that had shackled her since her husband's passing. The growl intensified, reverberating through the barn like an ominous drum. Sarah's heart pounded as she turned her attention away from the cubs. The air felt charged, an electric anticipation filling the space. She had urged her children to be brave, but now, in the looming specter of the unknown, doubt clawed at her. "Stay close to me," she whispered, her voice not quite masking the tremor of her fear. Little Ben moved to her side, while Lily shifted nervously, eyes darting to the door as if it held the answer to their plight. For a moment, fear threatened to paralyze her. The wilderness felt alive, a creature poised to strike. But then, beneath the layers of trepidation, something more significant unfurled within her. This was not merely a matter of survival for the cubs or her children. It was a test of her character, a crucible that could redefine her role as protector. Instinctively, she reached for the small shovel used for cleaning the barn. It was little more than a tool, but at that moment, it transformed into a symbol of her resolve. She had always managed with what was available. It was how she survived every day since her husband died. Every scrape and bruise had shaped her into someone capable of fighting for those she loved. "Listen to me carefully," she said, looking directly at her children. "If anything happens, if the bear, or whatever it is, gets in here, you run out the back and head for the house. I'll buy you time, but I need you to promise me you'll go." "Mom, we can help," Ben protested, his youthful defiance stirring something warm in Sarah despite the icy fear clawing at her insides. "No, honey. You must listen. I will handle this." The gravity of her own words echoed. She had to be not just their mother but their captain. Her voice steadied. "The cubs depend on us." With a determined exhale, Sarah moved to the barn door, peering into the darkness beyond. The growl resounded again, now closer, and everything inside her screamed to retreat. But retreat was a luxury they couldn't afford. This was her moment. She could either shrink back into the shadows of her fear, or rise to the challenge. The source of the growl emerged, not as she had envisioned. A lean, hungry wolf stepped into the dim light, its eyes glinting with an intelligence that sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. It paused at the edge of the barn. Then, as if sensing the presence of the cubs, it let out an impatient yelp. This was no ordinary predator. Whether threats were considered or not, the survival instinct loomed over all creatures. Within her swelled a strange empathy and a renewed impetus. The wolf, too, was trying to feed its young, a stark reminder of the fierce love that coursed through all mothers, human or animal. But Sarah couldn't afford to romanticize the wolf's plight. She had to protect the vulnerable ones under her care. "Get ready, kids," she murmured, adrenaline flooding her system. She lifted her makeshift weapon, calling on every ounce of strength. The wild instincts to defer reflected in her mind's eye were met by a budding courage. This was no time to falter. The wolf lunged. Time slowed. Her heart thundered in sync with the world outside. If she was to reclaim her narrative, she couldn't back down now. This was a confrontation she needed to navigate, not just with the wolf but also with her fears. A confrontation that could ultimately define her journey. Steeling herself, Sarah took a step forward, and for the first time, she truly felt the warrior inside. In this moment, against the snarls of the wilderness, she began to plan not just for her family's safety, but to assert her place in this chaotic world. And as the wolf's piercing gaze met hers, Sarah made a silent promise to herself. She would protect the helpless, not just from the predator outside, but from the demons within. As the tension crackled in the air, would she find the courage needed to face her fears head on? The answer to that question lingered like a challenge, waiting for its moment to emerge. The wolf, poised for action, shifted its gaze towards the open barn door, momentarily torn between instinct and need. Its hackles rose, showcasing the primal battle raging within. Sarah, aware of the stakes, felt the intensity of the moment amplify. The wolf's unpredictability escalated her own fear, yet beneath this fear, a steely resolve began to crystallize. With her heart hammering and the shovel gripped tightly, she made an assessment. The cubs were behind her, innocent and trusting. She couldn't allow her own paralyzing thoughts to guide this situation. She needed to orchestrate a response, not a frantic escape. A deep breath steadied her nerves as sharp clarity cut through the chaos. She envisioned the wolf's fierce maternal instinct, mirroring her own. If they were to enter a confrontation, it was not out of malice but desperation. Perhaps this predator had been driven to such extremes by the wilderness, the same darkness that had enveloped her since her husband's passing. This was not merely a protective instinct. It was a connection unveiled. "Easy now," she murmured, addressing not just the children but the wolf too. She crouched slightly, signaling non-aggression. The shovel lowered ever so slightly. The iron grip eased just enough to reflect an essence of tranquility and grit. I don't want to fight. I just want to protect. For a moment the wolf hesitated, its breath visible in the cool barn air. The growl shifted into a low whine, a signal of uncertainty passing through its body. Somehow, despite the imminent threat, Sarah sensed a fracture in the wolf's resolve, a window into unintended vulnerability. This was not merely a wild creature seeking food. It was a mother pushed to the limit, paralleling her own emotions. Listen, she continued, deciding to engage this moment rather than obliterate it. There's a way for both of us to protect our own. If you're hungry, there might be something I can offer. But you must let my children be. The wolf cocked its head, the nuance of her words seeming to pierce its primal intent. They were alone in the cold, dark confines, a mother and a hunter, both safeguarding their young. In that fleeting moment, Sarah felt the tether that existed between their experiences, two souls imperfectly mirrored in the harshness of their respective worlds. Ben, Lily, she whispered. We need to be quiet and calm. She motioned them backward, slowly, creating distance from the wolf. She might need to negotiate, to barter in the language of survival. As her children complied, the tension began to ease slightly. Sarah's thoughts ran fervently, the need for a plan unwound in her mind, and a seed of hope ignited deep within. She would have to confront her own deepest vulnerabilities to create an opportunity for resolution without further conflict. The moment of truth hung thick in the air. She couldn't afford to act solely out of fear, yet her heart raced at the prospect of losing everything. Instead, an idea took root. If she could establish trust, even momentarily, she might redirect the wolf's attention, channeling its energy into something that could save them all. As the wolf shifted and sniffed the air, a realization struck. They all were connected to the raw, relentless struggle for survival. The cry of a distant animal echoed in the night. Could she draw the wolf away, even for a moment? But what would that say about her? Was she willing to accept the risk? With the wolf's keen gaze still locked on her, Sarah took a step toward the doorway, her body trembling with adrenaline and determination. Whatever it takes, she whispered to herself, the words drumming in her mind. Through the crack of the door, she glimpsed the distant woods, shadows lurking in the depths. The choice was before her, to stay and risk everything for the sake of protection, or to venture into the unknown, not just for survival but to reclaim her sense of purpose. As she met the wolf's eyes once more, the understanding that blossomed between them, a shared need, a common pain, seemed to ripple through the air. Would she step into the wilderness and confront destiny head-on, facing not just the wolf, but everything life had thrown her way? In that primal standoff, the next decision lay before her, shrouded in uncertainty. The moment of truth was upon her, and Sarah knew that whatever choice she made would define her not only as a protector, but as a warrior. In that instant, the weight of her past and the promise of her future collided, teetering enticingly on the edge of choice. The moment hung heavy in the air, as Sarah took her first deliberate step toward the door, the wolf's gaze glued to her every movement. It was a decision laden with risk, a tentative step into a vast, howling unknown. Could she treat the wolf not merely as an adversary, but as a fellow traveler on this rugged journey of motherhood and desperation? Her breath quickened, not just from fear, but from the burgeoning realization that she was no longer merely a victim of circumstance. A flicker of defiance ignited within her, stoked by the fierce protection swelling in her chest. She owed it to herself, and to her children, to stand her ground. Okay, she whispered into the emptiness of the barn, still poised before the wolf. I'll draw it away. The wicked shadows of the woods danced before her eyes, pulsating with a life of their own, calling out with a siren's intimacy. She had embraced those shadows for too long, letting them harbor her grief. Now they seemed to beckon her toward a different outcome. The wolf's focus remained unwavering, its stance both vulnerable and formidable. Sarah understood. To navigate this perilous intersection of instinct and emotion, she had to expand her vision beyond survival. She needed to become the embodiment of the fierce, protective spirit that resided within. The barn's wooden beams creaked as she took another step, summoning the courage to break their shared tension. The shovel became an extension of her resolve, raised like a symbol of her unwillingness to let fear dictate her fate. "I'm going to help you," she softly declared, "if you let me help mine." She positioned herself strategically, sensing the raw, animalistic intelligence in the wolf's eyes assessing her every intention. The world beyond the barn door offered both a route to disaster and a potential for empathetic connection. In that moment, the wolf's growl was less of a challenge and more of a question lingering in the charged air between them, asking if she would truly go through with it. With a backward glance at her children, she steeled herself, focusing not on what they may lose, but rather on what they might gain together. Each heartbeat whispered encouragement. They were all families in their own right, bound by an unspoken struggle for life. She took a deep breath, remembering her husband's quiet yet steady encouragement during their years together. A reminder of the strength that resides in vulnerability. For them, she whispered to herself before stepping outside into the night. The chill of the air enveloped her, but beneath its surface lay a current of potential. She could hear the rustle of leaves, a symphony of sounds that had once felt foreign but now resonated deep within her, familiar and inviting. Every instinct told her she was walking a precipice, yet she pressed forward. The distant calls of animals echoed, amplifying her resolve to attract attention, to lure the wolf away from her children. As she moved further from the barn, Sarah felt it, an odd blend of fear and exhilaration, setting her senses on fire. But would the wolf follow her? Would it abandon its hunger for the promise of instinctual solidarity? Wrestling with the stakes, she glanced back at the barn, at her children waiting silently. In this act of defiance, she was no longer just a mother caged by fear. She was a negotiator of survival, ready to confront both the wolf's primal instincts and the shadows of her own grief. The forest loomed ahead, dark and obscured, promising no guarantees. Yet freedom, and perhaps understanding, hovered tantalizingly close. The stakes couldn't be higher, and her soul ignited with purpose. She wouldn't just be stepping into the unknown. She would emerge transformed. But as she felt the wolf's breath grow closer behind her, she knew it was only the beginning of a greater struggle, one that would test the very essence of what it meant to protect, and to be protected. How far would she go to reclaim that essence? Would she risk everything to teach the wolf trust, or would it remain lost to its instincts as she stood at the brink of transformation? The wolf moved with a fluid grace, its movements mirroring both hesitation and a deep-seated resolve. Behind her, the barn stood sentinel, an anchor of familiarity in this chaotic tableau. But as Sarah pushed deeper into the woods, the shadows consumed her, transforming the known into something both menacing and intoxicatingly unfamiliar. Doubt gnawed at her resolve. Had she miscalculated? A voice in her mind warned against confronting the apex of instinct without a plan. She silenced it, harnessing the urgency clawing at her insides. The howl of the wind played with her thoughts, yet amid the fear danced a pulse of determination, reminding her of the small faces waiting in the dark. What would she become if she succeeded? Would the wolf recognize her sacrifice or merely see it as an opportunity? The air crackled with tension, vibrating with the unspoken confrontation growing closer. She could smell the damp earth steadily cooling beneath her, the musk of pine intermingling with the electric anticipation of the predator behind her. Then, without warning, the wolf lunged forward, closer now, its breath hot against her neck. In that split second, she felt both terror and connection, as if their fates had intertwined like roots beneath the surface, a mother willing to sacrifice for the sake of her young, no matter the form they took. "Wait!" she called out, her voice barely breaking through the burgeoning chorus of the night. It was a plea for understanding, but did the wolf hear her? Or did instincts drown her words? Suddenly she stumbled, her foot catching on a gnarled root. In that moment of chaos, adrenaline surged through her veins. Settling awkwardly on the forest floor, she realized the wolf had stopped its advance, its head tilted in cautious curiosity. Perhaps this was the crack in their unsteady alliance she had hoped for, a chance for something beyond mere survival. Her heart thundered as she pushed herself back to her feet, wiping the dirt from her jeans. The ground felt much more stable beneath her, as if the earth itself was prompting her to rise again. She sensed not just the rugged obstacles before her, but the truth that the wolf was equally vulnerable here in the dark. To prove herself worthy as its savior, she had to take one more step, not just in distance, but in trust. "Come with me," she whispered, the words heavy with promise. She extended her hand slowly, a gesture of peace rather than provocation. "There are more pressing dangers ahead than either of us." The wolf hesitated, its sharp eyes narrowing as it considered her offer. Sarah's pulse quickened. It was a moment suspended in time, one that felt pivotal. Not just for her, but for both of them. Could she really lead an instinct-driven creature to safety? Would her empathy prove stronger than the wolf's basic survival instincts? As if sensing her uncertainty, the wolf edged forward, its gaze flickering between her and the dense darkness ahead. A silent conversation passed between them, reflecting unspoken fears and desires for connection amid turmoil. But then, cutting through the tension, a faint, high-pitched yipping echoed from the depths of the trees, sharper than the wind and laden with distress. Sarah's heart twisted. The sound was unmistakable, a cry for help, desperate yet faint. The wolf's ears perked up, its body tense, ready to spring into action. "Stay!" Sarah ordered, her voice firm yet soothing, a palpable resolve taking root in her chest. "We can't go alone." The wolf's muscles relaxed ever so slightly, perhaps responding to the authority in her tone. Together, they listened intently. If there were younglings in need, rescuing them offered a greater purpose than either had imagined. Breath hitching, she began to move once more, the panic of the unknown lifting slightly, fueled by the possibility of a more profound bond forming. But what lay ahead? Searching in darkness without a clear path would demand every ounce of courage both of them possessed. As they crept closer to the source of the yips, Sarah realized the stakes had skyrocketed. Would she find more than just the young? Would this journey unveil a much larger truth? Perhaps one that changed how she understood herself and the fierce bond thriving between all living creatures. In that very moment of decision, Sarah felt the weight of her past collide with the urgency of the present. How much further would she stretch her limits? And what precious answers awaited just out of reach? As Sarah moved cautiously through the woods, the path ahead dimmed into a cloak of vaporous shadows. The desperate yips continued to pierce the air, pulling at her insides like a symphony of unease. Each step she took was laced with purpose. She wove through the brambles with a fierce drive, her mind temporarily silencing the doubts that previously consumed her thoughts. This wasn't just about her. Every instinct pointed toward a mission larger than herself, one that demanded clarity and strength. The wolf followed closely, a sentinel now attuned to Sarah's energy. She could sense not only its hesitation, but a burgeoning trust, a willingness to confront the unknown alongside her. It fascinated her, the juxtaposition of predator and protector, instinct and empathy. Could their combined strength grasp the necessary resolve to face whatever challenges awaited them? Sarah pushed herself to summon the courage to believe they could succeed together. The yips grew louder, more urgent as Sarah approached a thicket of low-hanging branches. There was no time to spare. She could sense that the creature in distress was at the edge of a breaking point, teetering on the brink of despair. At that moment, she realized her own fear had evolved into something profoundly motivating, a determination so fierce that it ignited her senses. "Stay close," she whispered to the wolf, acutely aware that the night was drumming up uncertainties yet uncharted. It acknowledged her with a subtle nod, further solidifying their fragile alliance. She was not merely leading it into potential peril. They were delving into a shared purpose that would demand their authentic selves to unravel. When they finally broke through the underbrush, Sarah froze, her heart thumping like a war drum. Just ahead lay three small, shivering forms huddled together, their stripes stark against the soft earth. The tiger cubs appeared both vulnerable and terrified. The sobering reality that they were utterly alone hit her like a wall. The realization of their plight painted her with an unwanted urgency. "Guys, hang on," she murmured, moving closer to the cubs, her legs feeling like they were anchored to the ground. The wolf remained beside her, appearing almost protective, its gaze locked on the small creatures. Sarah grappled with how to approach these wild beings without overwhelming them. Each of her instincts pushed her forward, yet uncertainty held her tight, refusing to let go. Suddenly, the whine of one of the cubs pierced her heart. She could clearly see the fear stained on their tiny faces. A rush of adrenaline propelled her into action. "We have to help them," she said, turning to the wolf, whose amber eyes reflected the same commitment. Drawing from a reserve of strength she hadn't accessed before, Sarah knelt, palms open. "It's okay," she cooed softly, even as her own heart raced. "We're here to help." A soft growl emitted from the wolf. Was it a warning, or was it part of the instinct she had learned to respect? Still, waiting wasn't an option. With her perception slowly shifting, she began to recognize the enormity of her task. The reality settled upon her. This pivotal moment would demand more than just physical bravery. It required deep emotional intelligence and faith in her instincts. As one cub slowly inched closer, Sarah felt the world around her fade. It was no longer merely about survival, but about nurturing those fragments of life that depended on her empathy to heal. And in that moment, a profound revelation hit her. She was not only uncovering threads of connection between herself and the wolf, but also embracing the very essence of her humanity, her capacity to nurture and protect. However, as she moved to scoop up the first trembling cub, an ominous rustling from the depths of the forest pulled her attention away. A chill skated down her spine. Danger lurked, threatening to sever the lifeline she was forging. Would she be able to face this challenge, or would her newly discovered strength crumble in the face of this unforeseen threat? The instincts she so desperately tried to harness now seemed to resonate against the sharp reality gathering around them. Determination pulsed within her. But would it be enough to protect these lives she had just begun to accept as her own? As the shadows deepened around them, Sarah realized that confronting fear was no longer a personal journey, but one that could determine the fates of all those they endeavored to save. As the shadows deepened, pulsing with an unspoken tension, Sarah felt the weight of responsibility crash against her chest. The air thickened with an almost tangible fear, threatening to drown her renewed sense of purpose. What had begun as a confrontation with danger morphed into something far more significant. A test of resilience, not just for herself, but for the fragile lives that depended on her. The rustling in the underbrush intensified, a reminder that danger had not retreated, but rather circled ever closer, waiting for the right moment to strike. The wolf next to her shifted, muscles coiling, its instincts alerting it to the looming threat. Sarah's heartbeat echoed around them, a steady reminder of life, even in the face of potential doom. "Stay close," she whispered to the cubs, her voice steady, though tremors of anxiety rippled beneath. She knelt before them, finding solace in the tiny, trembling bodies yearning for warmth. "I'll protect you. I promise." The cubs looked to her with wide, hopeful eyes, innocent and trusting. That connection ignited a primal energy within her, awakening the fierce warrior she had evolved into over the past weeks. At this moment, fear transformed into a catalyst for action. Sarah rose, ready to face whatever challenge dared to breach their newfound sanctuary. The underbrush shook violently, and out sprang a lean, scrappy coyote, teeth bared and eyes gleaming with hunger. Sarah's heart surged with adrenaline. There was no time for hesitation. "Get back," she ordered the cubs and wolf, positioning herself between them and the universal threat that emerged with a snarl. The coyote stalked closer, assessing its options, its focus unwavering, and Sarah understood instantly what was at stake. She couldn't falter. Reaching deep into her pocket, she found a handful of raw meat scraps she had saved from her earlier endeavors. With a deep inhale, she launched them away from the cubs, a distraction, a tactical maneuver to protect the defenseless. Everyone knew the predator's hunger could bypass instinct when tempted by a prize. "Follow me!" she shouted, gesturing to the wolf with a determination that bridged their fragile alliance. To her surprise, the wolf took a shuffling step forward, almost as if affirmatively responding to her call. Together, they made a run for it, luring the coyote away, both demonstrating their resilience in the face of danger. The moment felt surreal. Sarah ran with fervor, adrenaline surging as she felt the wild energy between her and the wolf grow. They breached the edge of the woods into an open field, the coyote in hot pursuit, momentarily distracted by the scraps. With every stride, Sarah felt herself transforming. She was no longer the woman yearning beneath layers of grief. She was a protector, mercilessly dedicated to preserving those under her care, whether they be her children or the innocent cubs they had uncovered together. The world around her felt brighter, filled with countless possibilities emerging on the other side of fear. The coyote sensed the challenge, as the wolf instinctively took a more proactive stance, barking in warning and closing ranks with Sarah fiercely. Unusual teamwork surged as they outsmarted the predator together. The coyote, now realizing the odds were against it, turned and bounded back towards the trees, leaving behind a cacophony of muffled yips. "They're safe," Sarah murmured, breath coming in heavy bursts as they slowed to a halt. As the adrenaline faded, a powerful calm enveloped her. The moment crystallized in Sarah's mind. She was no longer defined by her loss. She had transformed into someone who could confront her fears and nurture vulnerable life. The realization burned brightly. She had achieved not only a rescue, but a profound reclamation of her own strength. With the immediate crisis averted, the reality of her actions drenched her in raw pride. The wolf shifted closer, its gaze deeply understanding, mirroring the journey they had traversed together. Sarah recognized an unspoken bond formed through shared peril. Returning with the cubs felt like returning home. The journey gave birth to a renewed purpose within her. She glanced down at the trio of tiger cubs nestled in her arms and felt the warmth of maternal instincts coursing through her. The world still had the power to deliver joy amidst darkness. She simply needed to nurture it. As Sarah led the wolf and the cubs back toward the ranch, her heart swelled with confidence. The simple act of survival unfolded into a story far greater than she had anticipated, one that had empowered her to shed the remnants of her past and embrace her newfound identity as a protector. She had not only saved lives today, but reclaimed hers in the process. With the threat of the wilderness behind them, the evening air filled with the rich promise of tomorrow. Confidence settled within her, embodying all she had overcome. As they entered the warmth of the barn, Sarah's heart harmonized with her children's laughter resonating inside, echoing her belief that she could fiercely love her family, her cubs, and the wild spirit that danced with life around her. In this potent moment of individual transformation, Sarah finally understood. To truly conquer her fears, she must first embrace them as inseparable parts of her existence. The shadows of her past had not vanished. Instead, they were woven into the very fabric of her resilience, an enduring reminder of her story, now transformed into one of strength and hope. And so, she carved out a lasting legacy for her children, and all those in her care from the raw strength she had discovered within. With pride coursing through her veins, she acknowledged that she was now the embodiment of courage, nurturing not only the vulnerable but inspiring those around her to find their own strength in the wild tapestry of life. Now, we stand at the end of this journey, and it's crucial that you participate. You need to subscribe now to ensure you're always updated with our emotional stories that reach the heart. You've reached the finish line of an inspiring story. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, and let us know your thoughts, your reactions, and your theories in the comments below. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who are in need of encouragement and inspiration in their lives. Your support means everything to us.